Chapter 9. A Series of Unfortunate Events. The weapons of the God Wars were numerous and terrible, but the abominations created by the House Durrell were legendary for their nightmarish ability to kill without contest. They were never stopped, but when Loka was finally executed, they vanished just as he did, perhaps rejoining the hell from whence they came, or perhaps only hiding in some dark crevice of the deep, awaiting their master's return. Kagadin Goss, Imperial General, year 42,423,989. The wind glided across her feathers, the sweet night air rushing over her beak. High above the sand she soared, her wings cast in starlight. Insects crawled through the sand. Perhaps another time she would risk a snack, but now she knew better. She had a purpose, and so she flew on. She was dangerously close to the place where the air stilled and the sound stopped, where there were no bugs to feast on. The presence was below, hunting, haunting. It was fast, faster than she with her wings and the wind at her back. There was fear. There was fear. The shape moved with incredible speed, from horizon to horizon in seconds before it was gone. Sule, came the voice. It was different from the one that had called her before. She turned in a circle and stared up at the tree, its trunk vast and ascending into eternity. Sule, came the voice again, louder, all around her. Wake up! Sule blinked. The hot morning sun streamed through the deck grates. She was beginning to question which was more real, her dreams or reality. Did it matter? Her sleep seemed to be sneaking up on her. Lily, wake up. It's high past noon. There was an old woman's face staring at her through the open porthole. Rise and shine, sweetheart, said Jun. The boys are cooking up a contraption to get us to the ghost ship. Sule watched Miro and Ben from the shade of a canopy that Jun had erected. They were working on the body of the flyer Reginald had taken to Blackfan. Why don't you just fly it? Sule asked. For the most part, the flyer looked all right, save for a few snap masts, maybe a little bit charred. Sule walked around to the other side. Oh, she said, stopping. Most of the other side was missing. Ben squinted at her in the light. Furnace is shot. Guide fins are blasted. I'm surprised they managed it back at all. And, yeah, we're taking what still works. They had made a sail from canvas hammocks. The grav masts were repositioned to the sides. Sule helped them carry various parts from the Sophie's hold, and after some time there was a flyer that looked like a smaller version of one of the boats that Jedum had sailed in the sea, the kind that floated above the waves, dragging their nets. For a moment, Sule was back in the burned ruins of Dendold. Should she have left so soon? What if she just left him there to die? She imagined little Jedum calling out to her, begging for help from beneath the rubble. She gritted her teeth. Stop it. There was nothing left. Not for you. Reginald mounted the floating platform, and it bobbed slightly. We have room for one more, said Reginald. Someone light. I'm guessing Rowan isn't interested. You're right, called Rowan from beneath the shade of a canopy. A fool's errand, said Wilton from above them. He was squinting down at them with his resting look of disgust. There's no hope. You might as well accept it. You've doomed us. Jun stepped up onto the side, giving Reginald a cold look. He ignored it and let the flyer's hammock sail loose. It pulled Dot in the breeze, and the flyer began to move frictionlessly through the air. I'll come, called Sule as she leapt to her feet. Reginald grumbled something about passengers and risks. She speaks their language, said Jun. She held out her hand and beckoned to Sule. She comes. Sule had to run to catch up as the flyer began to glide away, hovering just above the sand. She reached out, barely making it as Jun pulled her up with an iron grip. The modified flyer handled far more nimbly than Sule thought was possible as Reginald twisted the ropes, guiding the craft in a circle around the Sophie. "Keep an eye on my ship," Reginald called out. "Take your time," Ben yelled back, joining the others beneath the canopy, lounging in the garden chairs retrieved from the ship's hold. Ben sat and leaned back with his hands behind his head. "We'll get her fixed up by the time you're back." The flyer slid across the desert as if it were ice. A sudden gust of wind buffeted the sail. All at once, the desert dropped away below them, and they soared into the air as if gravity were an afterthought. In this case, that's exactly what it was. Jun peered over the edge, and by the look of her expression, immediately regretted it. Then they began to drop, and Jun stiffened and turned back, looking straight ahead with a certain greenish pallor about her. Sule reveled in the sensation. She let out a whoop as they were flung once more into the air. Reginald looked ahead, his hands expertly manipulating the lines of the sail. A hint of a smile curled at the edge of his mouth. The dunes whipped by, and on they flew. "Surely at this rate we'll be there in a day or two, not a week?" Sule asked. "Could be," said Reginald. "But the wind is at our back now. Returning will take longer." "And last I checked," said Jun, "we have no idea where this wreck is, or if it even exists. We could search for weeks and never find it. East isn't exactly what I'd call telling." She closed her mouth quickly and let out a little groan. "It's enough," said Reginald. The wind kept the intensity of the day's heat at bay. In time they came to a rest, far from where they had started. How far exactly, Sule wasn't sure. They were on an open plain with few rocks. The dunes had fallen away to a flat expanse of compressed white powder, rippling in little crests like a seafloor without its water. It was even more reflective than the dunes. In the distance it looked like a mirror. Sule had to squint even while wearing the goggles. "We'll stop here for the day," said Reginald. "It'll be dark soon, and no point risking flying without light." "Fantastic," grumbled Jun. She retrieved her pack from the flyer and wandered a ways away from where they stood. She unfurled a bag and began to pitch her tent. Reginald looked at her sideways, then turned to examine his compass, or what could have been a compass, if it wasn't so strange. Sule could see by the way he manipulated dozens of dials that it was more than it appeared. One hand stayed locked ahead, regardless of where he pointed it, and they all seemed to remain pointed in different directions. "How does it work?" Sule asked. "It's mapped to point always in the same direction I set. Once it's locked, it never strays from the path." "Sounds impossible." Sule narrowed her eyes at the device. "Could be, but it works. I don't question things that work," said Reginald. "If you question why they work, will they stop working?" Sule asked. Reginald rumbled with irritation, and Sule did her best to hold back a grin. Lily wouldn't have grinned. As the sun dropped behind the hills, the light of the sunset reflected in the salt flat, creating a second sky. High above, a large dark bird circled, probably following them in the hope of an easy meal, knowing that they would starve or die like Wiltham had said if they continued into the flats. The bird didn't understand flyers, so Sule worried if it would be the one to starve. Jun uncorked 2 canisters and withdrew what looked like dough. One was a deep violet and the other blue. She squashed them together in her hand, then threw them into the ground, where they began to smolder and then burst into blood-red flame. Sule could feel the heat from where she stood. High above them, the night sky had returned. Sule could see the faint silhouette of the cracked planet they had flown through, and beyond the telltale shimmer of the deep. When she returned her gaze towards the flats, she saw the carrion bird a distance away, settle down as it watched them. She pulled a piece of dried meat from her pouch and tossed it towards the bird, as far as she could throw. It eyed her and the strip of meat, but didn't move. In the morning, they gathered their things at first light. Sule could see the bird above, and noted with satisfaction that the meat was gone. The flyer's sails billowed, and once more they flew into the air. The sun rose and fell with the wind, and they were high above the endless white plain. They set up camp, broke it down, set up camp, day after day. They were far from the Sophie now, and they were quickly approaching the halfway point of empty for their provisions of food and water. They'd have to turn back empty-handed. That night nobody spoke around the campfire. Sule wondered what it would be like to live on this world, what she would do. As she rubbed the salt crusted at the corners of her eyes, she was finding the idea of thek farming more and more attractive. The camp was silent, and the dead world hung in the sky. Sule lay, her head sticking out the end of the tent, watching the stars. She'd forget she felt lonely when she watched them. There was a sound outside, like the muffled shuffling of feet. Sule's attention snapped back down to the ground. She thought she saw someone moving in the darkness. Something felt off. She stood, parting the tent to peer out into the desert. The campfire smoldered and she saw Reginald, and then she blinked. Reginald was gagged and bloody, and he was surrounded by a group of men. Sule froze and watched as they hit him in the head with a metal bar. Sule opened her mouth, but a calloused hand was shoved over her face, smothering her cries. She fell to the ground and kicked out as her attacker tried to choke her. One of her kicks landed and there was a groan of pain. The grip lessened and she rolled away, bolting into the night in a blind panic. She might have made it 24 paces before a looming silhouette appeared in front of her. Her face found it to be quite solid. Whatever the animal was, it snorted as her feet flew up and she landed on her back with a gasp. Her vision became a field of sparkling lights. She felt a hand grab the back of her shirt, dragging her back towards the campfire. Sule was thrown against Reginald, whose bloody face was hanging freely towards the ground as ropes were lashed around them. "Where did the old woman go?" a voice said in Kaldani. "I thought you had her," one of them cursed. "What are you waiting for? Go find her. She's a Vakin crone, and there's nowhere to hide." There was the sound of breaking glass, and a burst of light as fire leapt across the flyer. In moments it was engulfed in flames, illuminating a figure before the firelight. "Well, I'll be," said the man standing in front of the flames. "Stannis wasn't full of shit." "They're witch hunters," thought Sule, but how did they find them? The man grabbed Sule by the chin and rudely jerked her face upwards. She stared defiantly as he squinted down at her. His face was sun-worn and crow's feet pulled at the corners of his eyes. A black hat covered the top of his head, hiding his thin gray hair. "Well, aren't you a pretty thing?" he said. A groan came from behind Sule. "And what do we have here?" Reginald opened his eyes, blinking away the blood. He watched the man in the black hat warily as he circled them. "Trespassers, outsiders," said the man. "You are in league with the witches. You have proven as much with your magics and your skycraft. That sky is a place reserved for Muna's kind, as nature intended." He gestured, and as he did, there was the heavy beating of wings, and an all too familiar bird landed beside him. The bird was far larger up close, nearly half the height of the man. It let out a croaking rasp, its strong scaly legs carrying it forwards until it settled at his side. The man stroked its long neck and reached into a bag at his belt, pulling out a strip of dried meat. Traitor, thought Sule as she narrowed her eyes at the bird. One of the men, dressed in a salt-stained black, approached the man. Elias, he said, we can't find the crone. She's vanished. Good. Jun got away. How she had managed it, Sule hadn't the faintest idea. The plains were flat and hard as far as the eye could see. The witch proven, said Elias. The others mumbled with uneasy agreement. What do you want with us? Said Sule quietly. Elias turned, giving her a cruel smile. His teeth were perfect, and she immediately felt it was out of place. Sule shivered. It reminded her of Yorick, perhaps because both men were zealots, bewitched in their own ideas. There would be no negotiating with someone like him. You're making a mistake, said Reginald. We're no witches. What's that, devil? Said Elias, switching to perfect common, or as they called it, ancient. Did I hear you doubt your nature? Reginald kept his mouth closed. That's what I thought, said Elias. His men laughed. Elias gestured in a circle above his head, and the men dispersed. Can't stay in this place. Too close to your maker, he said, eyeing them. Elias toyed with one of the many rings on his fingers while he considered the flats. I don't make mistakes, he said coldly. They baked in the heat. Reginald hadn't said a word since the night they were captured. Not that he could. Both their mouths had been stuffed with filthy rags. They had been strapped to the back of something that Sule had decided to call a camel, though it looked only vaguely like the drawings she had seen. For one, it looked too lumpy and had only one head. So they continued, until Sule was convinced that she was about to break in half. She breathed in sharply each time the creature bobbed, its bony back digging into her spine. Her mouth was so dry that she tasted iron. They stopped at long last as the light began to grow dim. Sule was too tired to fight the restraints, waiting until one of the hunters pushed her and Reginald into the sand. The witch hunters began to set up a large tent, and Sule groaned as they were dragged further, the salt leaving thin red cuts on her skin. Elias sauntered over after they'd eaten, and ripped the gag from her mouth. Don't act so surprised, said Elias. The witches act fast. If they come for you after all, your screams of agony will be a warning. They were given a small sip of water, and then they placed the bowl on the ground, just beyond Sule's reach. A dozen paces away, the guard watched them with his rifle slung across his chest. He was smoking some kind of roll. Its tip sparked as he tapped it and spat into the sand. I could try to escape, Sule whispered to Reginald as she eyed the guard. Where? Said Reginald. Where would you escape to? I don't know. Away from here, said Sule. They'll kill us. Jun, said Reginald. I know that woman. She's working on a plan, if she doesn't have one already. We've traveled for days. It could be a week if she ever finds us, hissed Sule. Relax. This isn't the first time I've been tied up with guns pointed at me, said Reginald, and it won't be the last. Sule licked her lips, and she grimaced as the taste of salt flooded her mouth. She slumped and looked at the water bowl, and then saw the guard grinning. She cursed at him under her breath. They sat together in silence, watching as the witch hunters laughed and slapped each other's backs around the campfire. The guard still watched them, and two others joined him to stand at the far side of the camp, looking out into the desert. They're awfully scared of something that you say isn't real, muttered Sule. I never said it wasn't real. I said it wasn't a witch, said Reginald. How do you know that? Actually, how do you know half the things that you know? Said Sule. I'm going to die with you, and I don't even know who you are. What do you want me to say? Said Reginald. Something, anything, whispered Sule. You want to lay with the ship boy, Ben? He'd be good to you. There, you can stop talking now. I had a little girl, said Reginald after a moment. You remind me of her. Her name was Olive. What happened to her? Sule asked. She died, said Reginald, during the war. Do I seem dead? Interjected Sule quickly. What? Who raised you, girl? Myself, mostly. Do you want to talk about it? My daughter? Said Reginald. No. Sule shifted a bit and watched as one of the witch hunters finished off their food. She sniffed. She could smell it. She could picture it. She could almost taste it. You sure have a nose on you, girl, said Reginald. I'm hungry, and I get hungry when I'm probably going to die. And stop calling me girl. Sure, kid, said Reginald, and Sule sighed. They sat in silence. I used to serve one of the houses, said Reginald. I was a foot soldier. Which house? Sule asked. The biggest one, said Reginald. Vasting. He must have felt Sule stiffen. If it makes you feel better, he said, I disgraced the gods when I deserted during the war. I fought on 100 worlds, seen all kinds of horrors, taken who knows how many lives. And at one point you just stop. Stop fighting, stop caring, and you die. They call them husks, people who give up. Reginald coughed and shifted. They're replaced by a new warm body, and there are always plenty of those to go around. Life is cheap to Grail. And what if he hears you? Whispered Sule, glancing up towards the sky. She might no longer trust the Naucadia or the gods, but that didn't mean they weren't watching her, waiting for her to slip up and say something that pushed them over the edge. Then Grail would throw a lightning bolt and turn her to meat glass. Who? Said Reginald. Then he laughed. Grail? Grail can't hear you, kid. And even if he could, he doesn't give a rat's ass about you or me. You really believe that? Sule asked. Reginald chuckled. That's where the saying comes from. You can never trust a spacer. The saying is a lie. You can trust a spacer, but you can't trust the spacer to do what's best for Grail. Out in the deep, you can't hear his song. You don't feel that constant pressure on your ears, that weight on your head. He spreads it through the arterium like his poison seed. Those temples are his beacons. Without Grail, everything would fall apart. Sule made the connection then, to the warmth she'd felt in the temple. It was Grail, but something had made it felt cold. Why do they build them? She asked. The temples, said Reginald. It's in his message, a part of his power. It's Alcury. It can't be turned off. It's a fool's dream to try. Reginald grew silent as a guard passed them, eyeing them as he walked back from taking a piss. You want to know me, said Reginald in a low tone after he was sure the guard wasn't listening. My daughter and my wife were killed by Alcuers when they tried stealing food. My parents were too old to fend for themselves. The gods killed them. They promised to save our souls. But what does that even mean? We suffer so much. I'll do anything to break them. But right now, we do our best just to survive. I have my crew to look after. That's my mission. That's my little quest. That's my truth. Sule felt him take a shuddering breath. He said it like he was saying it for the first time in a very long time. My family. When I went to visit their graves, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it alone. I wasn't strong enough. This world is filled with death. Everyone has a story, girl. Everyone dies. I started Sule. Everyone except for her. I'm sorry. Sule turned her head to the side, and she could see the wet in Reginald's eye. She would have gone to the graves with him. She wanted to tell him that, but she didn't. Sorry, kid, sighed Reginald. Shouldn't have said that. I know you told us about your folks. None of this should have happened. You shouldn't be here. It's my fault. No, said Sule, and she shrugged. It's okay. It's not your fault. Pretty damn sure it is. Maybe a little bit, said Sule. But so what? Reginald had already shown her the stars, pirates, cause streams, and what it felt like to float without weight. She owed him that much. It was all on borrowed time anyways. She should be decomposing in a field. Reginald chuckled. A little bit. I'm not blaming you, said Sule. It could be bad luck too, you know. Well, that makes two of us then, said Reginald. On the ship, always captain, but here, call me Reg. Well, does the bad luck cancel out if there's two people with bad luck? Call me Sue. Lily? That's a fake name, said Sule, as she was taking a small risk telling him that. But it felt better, more real, and she decided that she didn't care anymore. Thought as much. Names tend to fit the face. You don't strike me as a flower. Nice to meet you, Sule, said Reginald, and she felt a finger tickle her palm, and she smiled as she took his finger in her pinky, shaking it through the ropes. Nice to meet you, Reg. Chapter 10. Aberneth. There are thousands of minor gods within the empire. Not all should be worshipped. Not all are true. Power not in the service of Grail is heresy. Without his blessing they turn to evil. Some are more wraith than living. Do not trust blindly. Delcat Mode, the Drexian Bridge, year 17,927,479. Sule woke to the sound of camels sputtering, pawing with their hooves. She was surprised to find that she had managed to nod off at all. It was late. A low moon was just rising above the horizon. The reflection of its light in the salt flats cast the deserts in silver. There was a sound, a dull thump and the rustle of a breeze. When she turned to look, there was nothing there. There was a different guard standing watch a few paces away, sitting cross-legged on the ground, his rifle laying on his lap. Sule heard the sound again. Did you hear that? Whispered Sule. She was twisted in the ropes, nudging Reginald with her elbow. Reginald snorted and jerked awake. What? Hear what? He said as he craned his neck to try to look around. One of the hunters was standing across the other side of the camp, staring out towards the desert with his rifle resting at his waist. Where was the third guard? The one furthest from the camp. There's something out there, said Sule. I'm sure of it. One of the hunters is gone. Sleeping, grumbled Reginald. No, said Sule quietly. The hair had risen to attention on her arms, and there was a sharp pain in her head. There was something wrong. Careful. What? Said Sule, trying to twist around. I didn't say anything, said Reginald. She noticed the shoe then, where the third hunter had been, sitting there alone, and her eyes widened. Try and roll around so I can get a look, said Reginald. He pulled to the right, and then Sule followed suit, pulling to the left, and then they toppled to the side. Sule landed with her face half buried in the fine salt, and she snorted, spitting out a mouthful with disgust. Now roll, said Reginald. Sule? But she wasn't listening. She was frozen in place, as for a brief moment she could see the thing out in the darkness, a shape floating above the ground. It's there, but I can't see it. But I can almost see it. You can almost see it? Said Reginald in exasperation. What's that supposed to mean? The hunter opposite them was pulled into the darkness with inhuman speed. A crunching croak was the only sound anything had happened at all. Sule let out a yelp of fright, and the creature half flew, half scurried into the night. It was gone. The picture of it in her memory seemed to be alive, an after-image skittering through her head. The third remaining hunter turned towards them at Sule's noise. Then he noticed his absent comrades. "Witch!" the hunter cried. He began to run towards them, towards the camp. "Reginald!" Sule cried out. "What in the gods is it, girl?" he yelled. "We have to run, now!" The rest of the witch hunters emerged from their tent, rushing out with torches and rifles, some wielded axes and swords in one hand. "They've come for their kin," cried Elias. "Take your positions." They fanned out into a circle, facing into the night with their weapons. A pale human-like arm sprung from the salt dust to grip the hunter as he passed. The hunter dropped his rifle, pulled his knife, and managed to scream before being pulled beneath the ground by a dozen more hands. His knife and rifle fell to the desert. "Roll!" Sule yelled, and so they did. Covered in salt from head to toe, Reginald grasped the hilt of the knife as another witch hunter was ripped away into the darkness. Covered in salt from head to toe, Reginald grasped the hilt of the knife as another witch hunter was ripped away into the darkness. And he cut their bindings and they clambered to their feet, running from the camp. The hunters fired blindly into the night as more of their number were taken by the creature, or multiple creatures. It was impossible to tell. They were nearly to a dune, and the sound of the battle was receding behind them. Then there was a whip and a crack, and Reginald collapsed into the sand, roaring in pain. Sule skidded to a halt as she turned. "Not one step closer!" cried Elias. His rifle was leveled at her chest as he moved towards them across the sand. Sule froze, and she raised her arms. Elias passed Reginald as he advanced on her, and there was the glint of metal in Reginald's hand, and he jerked, and the witch hunter yelled in pain as the blade found its mark, burying itself in his leg. Reginald tackled him, wrestling for his rifle. "Run, Sule!" yelled Reginald. There was more gunfire in the distance as the other hunters rushed to their leader's aid. "Run!" Sule ran. The crack and the whistle of rifle shots rushing past drove her on. Her adrenaline-fueled heart pounded in her ears. Not again, she thought. She ran for hours until her legs gave out beneath her, and she tumbled into the midst of the flat expanse. Nobody had followed, and as hard as she looked, she could not see the lights of the camp. She punched the ground, blooding her knuckles on the tiny crystals, and let out a cry. Why had she not tried? Because she was a weak, useless idiot. She sat in the darkness, and there were no sounds, and even the wind was still. She remembered the hand that had emerged from the ground and watched the sands warily for the sign of the movement. Was Reginald alive? Had the witch hunters fended off the attack? She muttered under her breath, standing to pace back and forth, and then lay back down, her chest rising and falling. She was so tired of running. Sule sat up so fast that her head spun. Had she managed to fall asleep? She felt like she hadn't been unconscious, but something had changed. The night was different. The sky had moved. Sule turned in a slow circle, squinting and trying to decipher what felt off. She stepped to the side and tripped on something. Sule looked up slowly. She was face to face with a human skull. She paused, and then slowly looked up a bit more. The hulking remains of a ship, cracked and split down the center, towered above her. She was standing in a field of half-buried skeletons. Either she had become a sleepwalker or something had moved her. She watched and listened for the witch. There was something. It almost sounded like breathing. Slow and methodical, it rose and fell, seeming to expand and contract the very world about the wreck. She took a step back and then stopped. It wouldn't have bothered to carry her here if it had intended to kill her. Or maybe it intended to do something worse. Ansel had told her about things worse than death. She took another step backwards. The ship breathed. You come. The air vibrated and Sule's muscles froze and cramped. When she tried to turn and run, she could only twitch. She looked about herself with her eyes, for they were not frozen like the rest of her. That voice, where had she heard it before? Sule felt herself take a step forward, but it felt like she was suspended by strings, being made to walk like a puppet. She tried to fight it, but in the next moment she was standing at the great crack that had sheared the ship in two. The strings were cut. Come, the ship breathed. Sule turned to look out at the desert of skeletons, and then back into the dark maw of the wreck. Who are you? She called into the darkness. There was no reply. She had no food and no water. She was already halfway gone, even if she somehow managed to escape the thing that was waiting for her inside. She took a deep breath and walked into the void. There was a humid warmth coming down the corridor. The interior was surprisingly intact. The polished wood walls had lost their luster, and the lamps that had lit their depths had been dark for decades. She unhooked one that was unshattered, and was surprised to hear the ambertine still sloshing around inside. Sule twisted the switch, and there was a pop, and then a light as the lantern began to glow. There was sand piled up in the corners, but the further she made her way inside, the more untouched the interior became. She passed quarters that may have once belonged to the crew, and a galley with cooking pots strewn across the floor and coated in dust. There were no bodies, and it was hard to tell if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Sule expected remains hanging from meat hooks around every corner. The only change was the rising heat and the breathing of the walls as though the ship was alive. Sule reached a large metal door which she recognized from the Sophie as the door to the drive room, but this one was bent and warped outwards like it had tried and failed to resist an immense force. And then we found the door, came John Stannis's voice in her head. The call whispered to her and tugged at her bones. The heat now was almost unbearable, and she wiped away the sweat running down her forehead. She tried to turn, but the resistance was like a wall, stopping her from moving until she returned her eyes to the door. She put the lantern through first, and then followed, crawling through the crack to the other side. The lamplight was eaten by pervading darkness, an ether-like cloud of black. There was a voice, no, a chorus of voices, all talking at once. They came from every side of her, but she couldn't make out what they were saying or where they were coming from. She turned the dial on the lantern as high as it would go. The low flame inside blazed to life. It was curled around the drive core, which still throbbed with a dim burning light. Its legs were human legs, or human arms, and there were hundreds of them. Its body was like that of a snake or a worm made of hundreds of faces that had been fused together within gray flesh. The creature's massive form was horrible, like a bloated corpse about to burst. The faces were all talking, blabbering, crying. It was an incoherent staccato that rose in volume. Sule dropped the lantern and covered her ears, closing her eyes as the room swam. The voices rising to a deafening roar in both the room and inside her head. Then it stopped, and all at once the faces closed their eyes, and there was an absolute silence. It began to move, sliding forward, uncoiling so that it moved towards her with a slow grace that defied everything about its size. Sule was frozen in place, unable to run as the same paralysis she'd felt at the entrance gripped her body. She struggled to breathe as the darkness closed in from all sides. The creature stopped, its true, horrible face right in front of her. It looked ancient and folded, wrinkled and gray. Its large eyes were hidden in the folds, like those of an ancient grandmother. The many nostrils of its faces flared, and it sniffed her. And then it smiled horribly, snorted once, and the lantern light was gone. "How long it's been," said one cracked voice in the dark, and then 1,000 voices after it. Sule could hear the voices in her head and in the air, and they reverberated through her bones. "How long it's been since one from the deep came to me." "Please," said Sule quietly, "please don't kill me. I don't want to die." The witch laughed, 1,000 voices in one. "Your kind, they never do they?" The witch laughed again, louder, and Sule covered her ears, yelling as the noise threatened to split her skull. "How does the little one come to be in Aberneth's home?" said the witch ferociously. Sule screwed her eyes shut as droplets of foul moisture sprayed over her, coating her in a slimy mist. "You brought me here. I didn't want to be here." "Lies! What do you want?" "It's what I want." "What do I want?" said the witch in several of its faces. "I want flesh. I want to consume." The witch groaned. "I want to grow until I can eat a star." The voice burned through Sule's head. "How are you here?" "By starship. We crashed." The words tumbled out of Sule's mouth, and she shook her head. "How many survive? How many survive?" demanded the witch. Sule thought about the others on the ship, imagining what the witch would do to them if it found them. "Enough," said Sule, and she felt the blood running from her nose. "I won't say." The darkness cackled all around her. "How you resist," said the witch. "What is your name?" Nanel, the village wiseman in Dendald, had always spoken of how names had power, how in magic and sorcery you should never tell a practitioner of the dark arts your name. Of course, that was all superstitious drivel. Sule. Ember, flame, spark, soul, in the old tongue. Sule, Sule, the voices chanted. There is a story to this one. There is a part of the mind that is hidden from us, hidden from herself. A power. Read her, read her. What is your family name? Haddock. A lie. I don't know. Aberneth, as that was what the creature had called itself, twisted silently through the air until it had coiled itself around her. There was no chance for escape as the wall of flesh closed in, illuminated with the hellish light from the drive chamber. Sule backed away and then gasped as she felt the witch press against her back, cold and soft. She tried to pull away. It was expanding to fill her world. She was sinking into it while her head was assaulted by the voices. This is how she would die. Read her, read her. Sule clenched her eyes shut, and then Sule was swinging by her legs. She was sitting on a log at the edge of a forest with trees that rustled with bright green leaves. She looked up at the grass meadow. Sule was vaguely aware that she had been scared of something, because her heart was pounding in her chest. Or had it been exciting? Sule looked about herself. It must have been a snake, she thought. Sule, where did you go? A woman's voice called out in the distance. Right! She had been in the middle of running away. She giggled and bounced off the log, her small feet carrying her through the grass. "Catch me if you can," the young girl shrieked in delight, her small form darting through the green underbrush. "Sule, get back here this instant," said the voice, which was familiar and yet strange. It made Sule laugh. The voice continued to shriek in the distance, clumsily pushing through the forest, not like Sule. Sule was small and fast, and not a single grown-up in the world could catch her. "Don't make me get your father." The sound of running water was getting louder now. She was sure of it. Maybe it would be a waterfall or a creek. It didn't sound like a river. Sule pushed away through a bush, but her next foot landed on air. She screamed, falling forwards down into yet more empty air. She hit a muddy embankment face first with a thud and a grunt. The land blurred as she did. A branch hit her arm, then her leg, and she was spun around and cried out in pain. Then as suddenly as it had started, her motion stopped. She groaned flat on her back. Her whole body throbbed, and she felt tears welling up in her eyes. She forced them back, righting herself with the winds, sniffling as she looked about herself to get her bearings. Then an expression of wonder spread across her mud-caked face. Sule sat in front of an expanse of warped objects rising out of a moss-covered landscape. The trees here were spindly and covered with fresh leaves as the light filtered through them in streams. The small green, transparent, pear-shaped bodies of forest spirits flitted among the dark, looming shapes. They danced in small groups, pushing themselves through the air like an octopus might through water. She had never seen so many in one place before. She giggled as one ran blindly into her, contorting as if confused, before pushing away and moving around her in a wide loop. Sule began to make her way through the ruins of some past civilization, as that's what she was sure it was now. It had to be. She could see the rusted metal through the moss, what looked like the wheel of a cart. A stream ran through the twisting remains. She followed it on a whim. Sule stopped when she saw something green and shiny catch the light beneath the water. It looked like a grasshopper. Curious, Sule reached in and pulled it out, yelping as she realized it was alive when it wriggled out of her grip and hopped up onto her shoulder. "Where are we? What is this place?" snapped the grasshopper. "Why is it hidden to us?" Sule side-eyed the grasshopper warily, but was not at all surprised that it had spoken. She looked around herself and wasn't sure where here was. She looked down at her hands and for a moment, mesmerized by their small size, she gripped and ungripped them, staring with perplexion. Then she heard the voice in the distance calling her name again, and she forgot all about her hands, crouching down below the grass. She crawled a ways until she reached the stream, plucking ferns and sticking them in her hair. Then she waited. "You stupid girl," said the grasshopper. It was crouching next to her on a blade of grass. "Show me what you're hiding." Sule frowned and swatted at the grasshopper. It was being mean. The grasshopper was insistent, and it kept hopping onto her clothing. She swatted it away again. Then it bit her hand. The sting burned like fire, and she ran away crying as it hopped after her. Sule ran through a meadow, trying to find the one who called for her, until she reached the edge of the grass. The heat from the grasshopper's sting seemed to spread all through her body, and made her face burn. But it wasn't the bite of the grasshopper. The air had changed. It was darker. Acrid smoke filled the air, and she coughed. There was an orange light shimmering behind the grass, rising into the sky. She pushed through and was buffeted by a blast of hot air. She was facing a burning city, and in the distance the meadows were burning away in a ring of fire. Fear gripped her, and the sting was forgotten as another gust of heat blew against her. "Now we're getting somewhere," said the grasshopper, its voice now like that of an old woman's. The great dark shapes of the ships flew overhead, above the city, emerging from the smoke as if they were great beasts, spewing fire from their bellies into the city. Winged shapes darted between them, colliding in the air and falling into the flames below. Lightning arced, and the thunderous booms echoed through the valley. A strong pair of arms wrapped around her from behind, scooping her up. She screamed, but fell silent as she recognized the voice. "Shush, it's all right, little one. I found her." "Thank the gods. We have an extract window in 20 minutes. We can't miss it." "Do we know what we're dealing with?" "Shodag's domain and the Imperial Core. The Interax forces are occupied at Tonam. We still have time." "Where is he?" "The beacon room." The world had a hazy quality to it, fading in and out of reality. Corridors blended together as the interior of a ship flowed behind her like mismatched puzzle pieces. She couldn't see the face of the man who carried her, but his voice was a comfort, one that she could not mistake. Ansel held her now. She gripped him tightly in return. "Now, what is it that you've been hiding from me?" said the grasshopper. They reached an intricately carved double door. Pushing through it, it felt like they were momentarily at the bottom of a lake. The air thickened and flowed around them like water. When at last the door opened, inside a low box displayed the world in ghostly miniatures of the burning city. Globes floated through the air, perfect replicas of planets and ships. Someone stood above it all. His back was to them. "And what is this place?" "I feel it draining me," said the grasshopper. "What are you doing, stupid girl?" "Do you think you're being clever? Do you think I wouldn't notice? I'm going to eat your soul." Then there was a shift, and Sule noticed the antlers growing from the man's head like roots. She clutched her ears as an ear-piercing shriek filled the room. The grasshopper was screaming, a blood-curdling scream. The world was pulled away like watercolors in water, but the figure in the center of the room persisted in immovable power. Sule tried in vain to plug her ears tighter. She saw the feet walking towards her, and then stopped. A knee touched the floor, and a hand wrapped its fingers around the insect, and then the scream grew muffled. "You should not be here," the man said to the grasshopper. His voice rose and fell, from young to old. It was the rustling of leaves in the old stillness of a forgotten forest, the crinkle of insects in the bark of a tree. "But I thank you. Time moves again. A door was open that was closed to me." He threw the grasshopper into the formless wall, where it collided and burst open, exploding a tide of black sludge that was far too much to fit inside the grasshopper's body. It churned and twisted and became a new creature, one with fangs and thousands of legs. It dove past the man, going for Sule, its maws stretching wide as it roared with an insatiable fury. The man clapped his hands, and the creature froze mid-leap. The man cocked his head to the side. Sule still couldn't manage to see his face. Behind her now, he cupped his hands over hers. She could feel the heat flowing into her limbs. She hadn't realized how cold she was, how cold she'd always been. "Reality is a delicate beast," said the man, "but all beasts can be slaughtered." And he leaned in closer and devoured. The hands guided hers, twisting and plucking at invisible strings, and the creature gurgled and screamed. Some part of it was dying and another was being reborn. A heat burned in Sule, a fire in her blood, and it became a new feeling, one that she liked, one that she never wanted to end. The thing's flesh rippled and split, changing as it did. It folded in on itself. What had been a monster was now something new. It looked about itself in confusion, as if trying to piece together where it was and why it existed at all. A hand rustled Sule's hair as she watched it hungrily, her whole body tingling with delight. "It's time to go, little one," said a different voice, a kinder voice, in echo. "You have to leave her. We'll find each other again in time, and everyone will be together." Ansel will look after you now." "I don't want to go," said Sule stubbornly in her little girl's voice. "Neither do I," said the shadow. "But each of us has our little piece to play, don't we? Now it's time to sleep." The world faded away around her as the smoke flooded through the doors. Sule found herself laying in the glow of the core. The witch! She looked around herself in panic. The pale flesh of its body was nowhere to be seen. Then Sule heard something in the distance. A shadow darted through the eerie light. Sule found herself backed against a pillar, sweat pouring down her face. Sule fell to the ground and covered her head. She scrunched her eyes shut and whimpered, prepared to feel the burning pain of the witch's fangs. Death then would be swift, or perhaps not. Perhaps she would join the faces, just one of the witch's many mouths after it consumed her. Death failed to arrive. Sule cracked open her eyes, slowly lowered her hands. It was She wasn't sure what it was. It was from the place the witch had brought her to, from her past, the one that was already fading from her mind like a bad dream. She decided then to call it a bunny cat, because nothing else quite fit. The bunny cat was white, with big drooping ears and a face with a feline nose and big round eyes of yellow-green. It stopped for a moment to regard her, hissed, and then bolted out through the crack in the door. Sule steeled herself, brushing off the dust on her trousers. "Hello, Sule." Both Sule's feet left the ground as she yelped in terror. She spun around. The voice she could hear in her head, but her ears were confused and quiet. "Who's there?" she called out, eyes darting from left to right. "An old friend," said the voice, coming in confused rolling waves of thought and flashes of color, ideas, and twisting images. "I was a helper, a servant for your father, mother, family." Sule doubled over in pain, clutching her head. "You," she groaned. Sule thought she'd been imagining it. Something was different now. Maybe she was really imagining it and she had finally been driven mad. It knew her family? She'd cracked. "What are you?" she asked shakily, slowing her breathing and doing her best to calm the thundering in her chest. "I am not sure," said the voice. "Much is missing. Even though I swim in knowledge, it is disjointed. There is a name, Samuel. You may call me that." "Where are you?" Sule asked, touching the dried blood beneath her nose, afraid that she already knew the answer. "Somewhere without light, where time has little meaning. I am nothing but a shadow, a fragment. Once it was not so, and yet I find myself yearning for something I cannot recall." "He's in my head," thought Sule. There was something digging around up there. She could feel it. She was imagining it like some kind of spider burrowing into her brain. The thing in her head had been there since she woke up in a stranger's body on Tuldrum. Then it was safe to assume that it wouldn't kill her yet. "Was it you who brought me back to life?" "Yes and no," said Samuel. "I was merely a guiding hand. The rest was up to you." "Can you not be so cryptic?" snapped Sule as she pulled herself out beneath the door into the pitch dark of the hall. Whatever the voice was, it wasn't an immediate threat. The more pressing concern was getting out of this place. It was a struggle feeling her way along the corridor without the lantern. She was waiting for the witch to make a reappearance, for the puppet strings to reattach themselves to her limbs. "Forgive me. It is like waking from a dream. I have been a prisoner in my own mind for far too long. It is coming back, but I fear the process is proving quite slow." "Where did the witch go?" Sule asked. A prisoner? Was her brain parasite some kind of criminal? We've dealt with it, said Samuel. It'll never hurt another. Sule paused. We dealt with it? There wasn't even a body. I have a lot of questions, said Sule. Naturally, said Samuel. Me not asking them doesn't mean I don't want answers. But first we have to get out of here. Can you make a light? Or tell me where a lantern is? Who knew what else was lurking in this ship? You can make a light. You have the gift in your blood, in your pattern, the control of the strand. The strand? Sule recalled the feeling from the dream of pulling and twisting, the power flowing through her hands. She felt her heart begin to beat faster. It's here, said Samuel. All around us. Look closely. Open your eyes. Sule felt strange. There was a feeling in her face like her skin was crawling, and she shuddered. The world began to wave and ripple, and then it was like she'd been blind her entire life and could finally see. Her mouth dropped open as the world seemed to blur and fuzz and come loose. It did look like strands, countless of them. Sule wasn't sure how else to describe it. She waved her hands through the air. She could feel and in a way see the wind as it curled around her and pulled down the hull. The ship all at once became a lot less scary. It was enough by itself. She didn't need eyes. Not when it was like this. She could feel the shifts in temperature and the solidness of the walls before she touched them. Pull on it, said Samuel. Feel the part of your soul that's tuned. With a grimace, Sule tried to move the strands with her newfound sense. It itched and burned beneath her skin as her fingers drew close. She pulled back instinctively. It feels dangerous. That's enough for now, said Samuel. The body needs time to adapt. Control of the strand is an art that requires a skilled anchor. Performing an alchemy on the natural order of things, alchemy as you refer to it, is a fickle thing. It can take centuries to perfect simple control. You are not wrong to call it dangerous. The strands, started Sule, then stopped, and fear boiled up in the pit of her stomach. Was this alchemy? She was, but she couldn't be. She sat suddenly in the dark corridor. Was the power a stolen gift, or had she had it all along? But I can't be an alchemist, whispered Sule. It's enough that people hate Nornlings. But an alchemist and a Nornling, she'd be done for. If anyone knows I can do this, they'll kill me, muttered Sule as she watched the world roll and vibrate around her. She slowly rose shakily to her feet and began to walk down the hall, her way illuminated by what she could only describe as the glow of the air as she followed the direction of the breeze. The Dalcati would kill her if they learned she had a voice in her head. They'd think she was possessed by a demon. Maybe she was? Our little secret, said Samuel, responding in a way to both statements. Not encouraging. At last she saw a light up ahead. Sule covered her face with her hand, momentarily blinded. She stood in a hangar, which was half buried by the salt. Part of the hangar was open to the blinding light of the desert. How long had she been inside? There was a series of flyers. Some were crushed beyond repair, but one looked like it might fly. We need sap and sails for the ship, said Sule. She licked her cracked lips and spat a pathetic amount of salty saliva. Do you think? Over there, said Samuel. And Sule noticed a pile of barrels and chests in one corner. There should be a sufficient fuel and sail to repair your damaged vessel. So, how long exactly have you been in my head? Said Sule as she twisted open the cap of one of the barrels and peered at the amber liquid contained within. She paused with a thought. How much can you see? Enough. Were you human? I cannot recall. Sule grimaced at the thought of her head spontaneously exploding at the dinner table to reveal some kind of horrifying outer spider. Why did she keep imagining Samuel as a spider? She'd have to find a way to get rid of him. But right now she needed him, and it was just her luck that this was happening at all. I can't fly a ship, said Sule, as she made her way to the intact flyer. I will explain how to operate the panel, said Samuel. Our mutual survival is in both of our best interests. Until it wasn't. What kind of interest did a something like Samuel have? Interest until its eggs hatched in her head. Tell me what to do, said Sule, wiping off the center console and its array of dials and buttons. She crouched to examine the stowed repulsor silk. They tried for over an hour to rig the sails in the console, but the flyer was refusing to cooperate. Some inner mechanism that operated the sails had corroded away. The endless stream of instructions from Samuel was driving her more mad than she feared that she already was. This won't work, said Sule finally, throwing up her hands and dropping the bundle of tangled sail lines back into their compartment. We need more than one person. It is possible with one, said Samuel. In a past life, I have operated such a vessel. You just need to do what I say. Exactly. Well, right now you aren't the one with the hands, said Sule. And the hands say not going to happen. Sule sighed and left the flyer, sliding down against its hull to gaze out into the shimmering heat of the desert. She ignored Samuel as he berated her about giving up too easily. She stayed there for quite some time, feeling too drained to move another inch. She'd nearly nodded off when there was a flash of light far in the distance, far out in the flats. Sule squinted, unsure if she'd imagined it. What is... There it was again, a flash of silver. I see it too, said Samuel. Hide. Something is coming. Sule didn't move, resigned to whatever fate awaited her. It might have been her birthday today. She wasn't sure of the day. But 17 standard years was long enough of a life to live if this was all it held for her. Death and voices in her head. It was a single sail, rapidly moving towards them across the flats. A cloud of dust billowed out behind it. A few moments passed, and then Sule could see that there was a figure behind the sail. The figure slid to a halt on their makeshift skis at the opening of the hangar. They looked as if they'd been fashioned from charred planks of wood. The woman pulled on the tattered remains of the repulsion silk sail they had wrapped around their waist next to a compass box. For it was definitely a woman, their face wrapped in fabric. The woman pulled up her dark goggles and stared down at Sule, tilting her head as she delivered one of her soul-penetrating stares. Now how in the 7 hells did you beat me here? Said Jun. Chapter 11. Reverse Ambush. A Molt rifle. Many armors can also repel the common munitions, though Molt rounds, I feel, will forever be difficult to stop. Sneak a single one of these babies through a wardling's defense and you can instantly turn even the thickest metal to molten honey and internal organs to steaming jello. Farak Gavat, Norian arms dealer, year 39,223,333. Reginald was strapped to the back of a camel, the sun burning. His leg throbbed with a constant rolling pain. He cracked open an eye and saw Elias with his black hat riding to his left. The other hunters flanked him, swaying up and down in their saddles. Reginald closed his eyes and opened his right. There were 3 more riders, far less than a dozen or so that had ambushed them in the flats. The creature had made short work of them. Not that it mattered any more. He was going to die on the back of this camel. He was wrapped so tightly in so many ropes that escape was hopeless. Even if he managed to free himself, he'd just fall to the ground and lie there until the sun finished the job. The girl had gotten away. That was enough. Jun would find her, if the creature hadn't. "You've come too," said Elias. "I was worried that the witch had set a curse on you." He spoke in common, and Reginald watched him warily. "I know more about you than you think, you and the sky folk," said Elias, adjusting his hat. Reginald tried to talk, but there was only a hoarse rasp. Elias moved to his side and uncapped the lid to his canteen, giving Reginald just enough to wet his throat. "So kind of you to care," said Reginald hoarsely. "I wanted to ask you about the girl." "There's been lots." "Which?" "A heathen like you, I'm sure there has." Elias pulled a cigarette from a pouch at his belt. He pressed 2 metal sticks together at the tip, and the sticks glowed white-hot where they touched. "I'm referring to the sprightly little thing that gave us the slip." Reginald remained silent. "You're not in league with the witch," said Elias. "Oh?" said Reginald. "I think you're something worse. There was a time during the Great Fall where they talked about the endless armies of demons from the stars. It's folklore, but the sky ships and the way you talk, the way you dress, you're not from this world. You're from the outside. Behind you is an army from hell." "Could be," said Reginald. This man was so hopelessly lost in his backwards fairy tales, there'd be no helping him. "Not the girl, though. The girl is a witch, without a doubt. Went and joined her sister in the salt wastes." "Good for her," growled Reginald. Without warning, Elias reached over and steel flashed. Reginald closed his eyes in resignation, prepared for the cold bite of the metal, but the ropes around him fell away and he dropped to the ground, landing with a thud in the hot sand. Elias whistled, and what remained of his band of hunters drew up beside him. "Our short time together is at an end. I thought I'd make an example of you in the town with the fire and stake, but I've changed my thought. Make peace with whatever it is you pray to," said Elias. He nodded at a man to his right, the one with an eye patch and a toothless grin. He raised his rifle. Elias raised his hand. Reginald watched his fingers. The hand started to drop, and the rifle holder tensed, but Elias's hand paused as his face fell into a frown. The figure of a woman was walking toward them through the simmer of heat. Reginald looked up, squinting. "Sule?" The lack of water was addling his mind. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," called Sule in the distance. The rifle snapped towards her. Elias barked a laugh. "You gonna curse us, girl?" "Might," said Sule. "With your witch sister? Hiding in the sand, see?" said Elias. "She's dead," said Sule. She grinned a wide grin. "There ain't room for 2 in Cag." "Shoot her," said Elias. The hunter with the eye patch raised his rifle. There was a zipping sound, and where the eye patch had been, there was now a gaping, bloody hole. "Pop," said Jun on the top of a distant dune, squinting into the scope of a long-barreled rifle. Sule dove to the side, and the crack of Jun's gun echoed over the desert. 2 more hunters fell, and the camels cried in the way that camels do. Elias tumbled from his mount, yelling as his camel toppled onto him. He raised his pistol to take aim at the girl. There was a hum to the air. Elias looked about himself and squinted into the sun. The desert was empty, but the sound of the humming rose, and the hunters looked about in panic. Then all at once, the blinding silver sails of the Sophie rose slowly from behind the dune like a waking titan, her silhouette rippling in the heat. "Drop the guns!" yelled Ben. He had the sole deck gun aimed at the group. The barrel tracked the hunters as the Sophie drew downwards, coasting about as winches churned and Chorse spun the wheel. Miro had his own rifle, and Rowan crouched by his side. "Demons on the witchcraft!" cried one hunter. "Hold your ground!" yelled Elias. He emptied his revolver, firing shots up at the Sophie. Ben ducked and then fired. There was a boom and a scream as one of the Sophie's cannon shells flew past and blasted a column of sand into the air, sending a hunter flying. The others looked for cover where there was none. The Sophie was close enough now so that she loomed over them. One of the men began to shake. "Don't you dare!" yelled Elias. One gun fell to the sand, and then the rest followed. Elias gave a disgusted sound and grabbed Reginald, pointing the gun at his head. "You want him? You can take his dead body." There was a bang and Elias screamed, falling to the ground as blood exploded from his foot. Reginald fell to the side, looking up to see the girl staring in shock, both her hands on a still smoking pistol. Elias rolled and fired, and Sule fell to the ground. "No!" yelled Reginald. Elias stood, taking aim again at the girl's crumpled body. There was a zzz crack, and his hand holding the revolver proceeded to explode in a cloud of red mist. The hunters cowered away, covering their heads, and Elias fell back to the ground, screaming as he clutched his bloody stump. Reginald limped towards Sule. He reached her and knelt, seeing the blood pooling on her side. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. "No, damn you, girl," he muttered. Reginald closed his eyes and bowed his head. "Is it over? Am I dying?" said Sule suddenly. Reginald looked up in surprise and then did a double take, and then he checked her side. "It's only a graze," he said. "Are you sure?" said Sule, her eyes clenched shut. "Yes." Sule opened her eyes and then touched the wound and grimaced. She rose shakily to her feet, and then the two began to help each other towards the Sophie. "You're making a mistake," cried Elias. "The hell I am," muttered Reginald as he collapsed onto the gangway. "She'll steal your soul." "Keep talking, and I'll steal yours too," yelled Sule over her shoulder. The Sophie began to rise, the thrum of her drive sending ripples through the sand. The hunters stared. A dark spot appeared on one of their trousers. A moment later, a second craft rose from behind a distant dune and followed the Sophie into the sky. A little statue of a man with a pointed hat fell into the sand beside Elias. They watched together as the witchcraft departed. The alien hum dissipated. Elias's eyes burned with a cold hatred. The bright blue of the planet's atmosphere gave way to a welcoming expanse of stellar gas and stars. The Sophie purred with a newfound life, her drive fueled by the sap retrieved from the long-dead ship. Sule stood at the bow, watching the planet drop away below them. Reginald was below deck, being tended to by Rowan. She said he was going to be fine. Sule touched the bandage around her midsection. Already she could hardly feel the graze left by Elias's bullet. Ben joined her, sitting on a banister that looped around one of the masts. "That was incredible," he said. "You were incredible. Swooping in on that flyer with Jun." He made a motion with his hand, crashing down into the deck. "The entire thing was brilliant." "Thanks," said Sule. She brushed her nose and looked away. She and Jun had weighed the flyer down with enough sap to point to where it could barely coast above the dunes. "We had no idea you could fly a ship," said Ben. "My gran taught me a bit," said Sule, racking her brain for something that could possibly explain her newfound talents. "Fishing mostly. It's not like I'm a pilot. I was probably 10 when he let me steer." All of it was a lie, but Samuel could probably explain the flyer down to every bolt. He could explain how many degrees to turn every knob on the console. He told her which buttons to press, and even how far back to pull the wheel. Jun had been pulling the sail lines and had been doing most of the actual steering, though. "When you shot that asshole's foot," Ben laughed. "That was a close one." "I was aiming for his arm," muttered Sule, grinning sheepishly. "Don't tell the others that. It'll be more badass," said Ben, and the corners of his eyes crinkled with laughter. "If you want, You could ask the captain if you could stay on. I'd back you up. Like, join the crew, said Sule. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. The thought she'd been trying to avoid popped into her head. I have people on the rows I need to find. After that, then, said Ben. Maybe, said Sule. They watched the white reflection become smaller. Imagine if we couldn't escape, said Ben. I think we'd find a way, said Sule. It might have taken a long time, but we would have in the end. You know those people down there never will. They'll never know about all the wonder in the universe. They'll never see the Movinar Bridge or the twin rings of Heldon's world. They'll never know that stellar gas smells like salt and raspberries. He laughed. What a life that would be to live. I've never seen the Movinar Bridge or the twin rings, said Sule quietly. You will, don't worry. If you fly with us for long enough, you'll see more of the deep than you'll ever want to. Ben looked around. Wait here, I have an idea. Ben jumped to his feet and disappeared into the pilot house, coming out with a box with a big metal horn attached to its top. He placed a black disc in a box, and there was a crackle as it began to spin. What's that? Sule asked. Ben looked at her in surprise. You've never seen a music box? A sound emanated from the horn, long and deep, then again, falling into a steady beat. Is it Alcury? She asked in astonishment. It sounds really groovy, said Ben. He grinned and held out his hand. It's not Alcury, just some classic ingenuity, the kind that's only a little bit heretical. Come on, you need to unwind. I need to unwind. The music picked up. It was a fast beat, filled with energy. But I don't know how to dance, said Sule in a panic as Ben slipped her hand into his. Everyone knows how to dance, said Ben. The moves aren't the point, they're just extra. He offered his hand forward. Just move. You can follow my lead. Sule took his other hand, and suddenly they were in motion. Ben twirled her around, and the music paused, and Ben pulled her low. Sule looked up at him, into his dark eyes. Then the instruments rose together in a wild rhythm as the voices climbed, and Ben bounced his eyebrows, and she laughed. They danced back and forth, wiggling and twirling about without a care. For a moment, their troubles were forgotten. Behind them, the planet glowed a white sphere until it was swallowed by the everclouds. They lay on the deck, and Ben pointed out into the deep. See that star? He said. Sule squinted towards the place that he was pointing. It flickered between red and blue. It was surrounded by a nebula of mixed strings of electric purple that twisted out into space. It was hypnotic the way it moved between the colors. Red, blue, red. Yes, why does it change? That's Jezebel's realm, one of the 9 domains of the ruling gods. That's where we're heading. Every domain is different. Each god has their influence. Ever been to a temple? You know how it plays with your head? That's Grail, the stability. The temples are like beacons expanding his domain. Imagine that, but just so much bigger. They've been here for so long and their alchemy is so strong, well, it changes things. The deep itself. Jezebel. Sule had heard that name before. She was one of the great gods, one of the 9 that the Dalkadi worship. 9 realms, 9 gods. The god of light, whispered Sule. The master of illusions, said Ben. They say she was never quite as good as the old master of this realm. Loka was always king when it came to that kind of thing. After the war, after she backstabbed him, she became ruler of both. Do you remember Loka? Sule asked. No, that was before my time. But I've heard a lot about it from the old man. Loka destroyed so many lives with his ambitions. Ben's expression darkened. He was the cause of the war. Wanted to change what's worked for millions of years. I don't think even he realized how bad it would be. Now that he's back, well, gods don't tend to change their minds. It won't be good. You can already see the chaos building. The best we can do is make some noise. Like a rock in their shoe, said Sule. A thorn in their heel. To all of you, for your quick courage, quick wit, and your timely rescue. Reginald raised his glass, and Sule and the others raised theirs. Reginald's leg had been tightly wrapped in a bandage, and his face was slathered in salve. Hear, hear, called Ben. The drink was bubbly with a layer of pink foam. Sule sipped at it. It was an odd sensation, like slurping up something immaterial. It tasted like she was biting into a fresh orange, but then there was a hint of cream and alcohol. It's nectar, dear, said Jun, seeing Sule's expression. Execure from a god's teat. Sule looked at her with horror, and Jun laughed, a distinctive snorting bark. So not actually? Sule asked. No, said Jun. It's not. It's from some amorphous, aphid-looking blob that lives in the deep. They do milk it, though. It's delicious, Reginald chimed in. What it is delicious, and we will bask in its warm glow this fine evening and enjoy ourselves. Go easy on it, though, he added. It's potent. And so they did. Ben handed Sule a fresh loaf of bread and some dried jerky that was a bright fluorescent blue. She bit into it ravenously, staining her lips. This is delicious, said Sule with a full mouth, noting that the others hadn't touched theirs. What is it? You don't want to know, said Ben. It's from Chorsk's stash. You're welcome, said Chorsk. Sule stopped mid-chew and stared at Ben with wide eyes. She looked at the blue jerky, then shrugged and stuffed the rest of it in her mouth. Sule had a family. In the moment, that's how it felt. She looked around at the faces. She blinked away tears. It was something that she had always wanted. She had only a single fleeting memory when she was a child. The blank face of her father and her mother eating at the same table. There was laughter and joy. Thank you, she blurted out. Everyone looked at her. Thank you for letting me come with you, for being such good friends. There were the tears she had been trying to hold back. Oh, come here. Jen put her arms around Sule, pressing her head to her chest, and Sule began to sob. It's okay, let it out. Jen looked across the table at Reginald, who shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry, cried Sule. It's just been a lot of things going on, and I... Oh, this was embarrassing. She lost it, and she couldn't stop it coming out. It's no worry at all, said Rowan. The executor does that to people. Makes you all emotional. Jen and Reginald both nodded. Do you need some space, or... No, I'm good. Sule backed away from Jun. Thank you, she said. Then she grabbed the bottle of executor and drained it. Oh, said Jun. Sule immediately reached for the other bottle, and Reginald casually moved it further away from her reach. The instant effect of the executor hit her like a train. She was either completely sad, like a dead, rotting flower, or completely... There was a loud meow from below the table. Uh-oh, said Felix loudly, looking pointedly towards Reginald. And Sule burst out laughing. There was a thump, and then silence. The executor had made her vision stretched. Everything had an oddly pink tint. Sule looked up from her desk, where she'd been sketching a picture of the ruin in the desert in a journal Jun had gifted her. The old woman had been giving her lessons. Jun had said that she was a natural. Now, when she couldn't sleep, she would draw. It was relaxing. Ben, she called out, what are you doing? The shuffling stopped, and there was silence. Ben, she whispered, slipping out of her chair and tiptoeing to the door. A pang of fear gripped her as only the quiet dark answered. Miro? She cracked the door, and there was only the dim light from a single lantern at the end of the hallway. She eyed a fallen crate, empty with its top skewed on the floor. The others had all gone to their quarters except for Felix. As far as she knew, he slept in the engine room. Something furry and white ran past, hissing as it chased the black cat. You! Exclaimed Sule. She watched the bunny cat chase the cat down the hallway. It ran around the corner and disappeared. Sule pinched herself to make sure she was awake. Yep, very much awake. Sule followed and turned just in time to see it disappear into a storage room. She crept up to the door. It creaked loudly as she slowly peered around. A large hand suddenly appeared next to hers, wrenching it wide and tearing the door from her grasp, revealing a face twisted in fury. Sule scrambled backwards, but he was already on her, slamming her against the wall. She could smell his breath against her ear. His hand pressed against her face as she tried to scream for help. Bet you weren't expecting John Stannis, witch, yelled John Stannis. Fight him, commanded Samuel. In a rush, Sule tried to draw on the sense she discovered in the ruin, and the world changed and slowed. She could see the hair rise on the man's arms. What? He managed just before he was dropped to the floor by a spark of light, landing with a wheeze like a deflating balloon. Did she just do that? Sule stared for a moment, gaping in surprise. Sule? Something up? Rowan called from her room further down the ship. Hell! Sule opened her mouth, but it was the moment that the witch hunter grabbed her leg and she toppled, hitting her head on the floor. She rolled over, dazed. The witch hunter growled and his hands found purchase around her throat. Your magic won't work on me, he cried. Sule choked, trying to pry his hands off. Yes, it will. What are you waiting for? Kill him, said Samuel. She could hear his beating heart, and she could feel the little sparks of energy driving it. She could pull on it. She could stop it. By the 9 did she want to. She'd eat it. She'd tear it from his chest and bite into that salty succulent. Then there was running footsteps. The witch hunter pulled her up, holding her head in a vice-like grip as he pulled her into the hallway. What was that? What was she just thinking? It vanished from her mind. Did she just want to eat him? Rowan appeared, then Jun and a limping Reginald beside her. Reginald held a pistol, and Jun a large blunderbuss. They stopped and stared in shock. Where's your magic? Hissed John Stannis. They're not witches, mere devil's servants. They don't know, do they? You don't want them to know what you are. Don't move any closer, he cried out, or I'll gut her like a Bandulian dune snail. He pressed an icicle-shaped shard of green glass to her stomach. What do you want? Said Reginald. He was surprisingly calm. He looked at the witch hunter and then at the fallen crate on the ground. He shot a sidelong glance at Jun. How long were you in that box? Quiet! Cried John. You drop the guns and go to the corner. Then we wait for Elias. We're going to have ourselves a little chat. That's not going to happen, said Reginald. Sule felt the sharp point of the blade dig into her skin. Her body screamed to fight back. She could feel Samuel pulling on her mind. The world was alive with a clarity she'd never known. She could see every pore on Reginald's face, but the witch hunter was right. They were watching. They hated people like her. They hated Alcuers. She hated Alcuers. Everyone hated Alcuers. What would they do if they knew what she was? She couldn't risk it. Then I'll kill her. It's not going to happen, said Reginald again, limping slowly forwards and to the side. Don't move, yelled John. He dug the glass shard tighter, and a thin trickle of blood stained Sule's shirt. It's not going to happen because, said Reginald one last time, hitting a lever on the wall. There was a grinding of gears. The wall split open, pulling outwards and sliding to the side. John Stannis stared in disbelief, and then horror filled his eyes. The swirl of stellar gas and the infinite twinkle of countless worlds swam in his vision. No, he gasped, and for a moment his grip on Sule slackened. Fight, said Samuel. Now. Sule twisted her face down and sunk her teeth into his flesh, tasting blood and sweat. John screamed then, and she found that she wasn't sure if it was from her bite or the realization he was never going back to Cag. He released her, and she darted forwards to the others as they rushed forwards. Reginald moved to stand above the defeated hunter, leveling his pistol at the man. John cradled his bleeding arm, looking up at them with a hopeless, terrified expression. I've been abandoned by the gods, whispered the witch hunter. I have been sent to hell. A thin smile split Reginald's face. Welcome to the deep and the dark and the endless wonder of worlds unseen. Then the butt of the gun swung, and so came darkness for John Stannis.